Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this episode, I chat with Chidi Asoluka. As a child of Nigerian immigrants in New Jersey, he was actually expected to kind of take off this path of becoming a doctor or a lawyer, but through sheer kind of faith, if you want to call it that, he actually ended up going towards education space because one time he was having a chat and an interview, and the interviewer, mentioned that he might actually be a great fit for this kind of roles. And so he took interest in it, ended up really kind of feeling like that's where his passion lies, and that's what he's been doing since then. He's been working with young people and really creating innovative things within the education industry. And one of those things is called NewComm, and it's an initiative that creates these dynamic learning ecosystems for young students by bridging the gaps between industry leaders and academia. He works with local community leaders, people from different parts of New York in this particular case, different socioeconomic areas, and bringing them together to kind of learn from one another. He has mentors that work there, and just really creating this experiential learning, this hands-on learning, this exposure-based opportunities for kids that otherwise would not have that access. So really interesting stuff that he's doing. So if you're interested in kind of education space, starting things, he tells his story of kind of how he goes deeper into like how he got into this space. And I really just find him really inspiring, motivating, and just, a good person who's really trying to make a difference in the education space, which needs honestly so much work, frankly speaking. So check it out. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. He has a lot of different ideas about kind of like educational reform and just the future of community-led learning. Brilliant stuff. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, share, and come back for more. Chidi, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
I love it that we're both matching in white. I don't know, maybe it's a Friday color. I don't know what it is, but
yeah.
maybe it's the spring is coming.
It's definitely a ode to spring for sure.
Yeah. I'm really excited to chat. I'm always thankful to be introduced to awesome people. And you and I got introduced, and when you and I met, and I was like, you're doing awesome things and something that I'm very passionate about when it comes to education, when it comes to youth, creating opportunities, making an impact. But before we get into the work that you're doing today and kind of, tell me the story of how, who you are and kind of how you got to the work that you're doing today, and give me the background of where do you come from?
Yeah. Again, it's a pleasure to be doing this and to be able to share my story in this way. But yeah, I'm the child of Nigerian immigrants. Came to this country in the late 70s, early 80s, and they found their way to New York, New Jersey, and I'm their only son. And really, what has been the governing framework of our family is that we have to do better than them. That's always the Nigerian way, is that, or a lot of immigrants, is do better than them. And so we were really kind of being a doctor, lawyer was kind of the thing. And ever since when I was young, I realized something in me was not drawn to those professions. While I admired them and thought they were noble professions, I always saw myself as an artist, but I didn't know what that was going to be. And so my parents kind of let me roam a bit. I'm not sure they were always in love with the fact that that was not my calling to be doctor, lawyer, engineer. But they kind of just sat back and just said, let's just see what this young man does. When I was in high school, I was writing poetry, I was writing short stories, I was kind of doing that whole thing. But I also found myself working in business. And so my senior year in high school, I was introduced to the credit card industry, actually. One of the benefactors of my high school started MBNA America Bank. And at the time, the idea of affinity marketing, having your college or your dog on your credit card was a big thing. And I thought that was really fascinating. And so all throughout first of all, the summer after my senior year and all the way through college, I worked at the bank. And I worked at customer retention and sports marketing. I interned all over the bank. And I thought, you never know. Okay, maybe I am a business person, because I really did enjoy that. And then my senior year in college, it was the interview to kind of launch my business career. It was part of their management development program, and they're asking me all types of questions, and I'm ready to step into my full-time job and become a banker of all things. And then the very last question, the interviewer asked me, what will make you happy? Working here at the bank and growing our bank to considerable success, or developing a course or program that can change the world, which it was a question I had not prepared for. And I didn't, like, it was such a left field question. And I knew the right answer was to say the bank, but it did, it did do something, it planted something in me. And I started to explore this idea of building things. And so I said the bank, and she said, I don't believe you. And she said, I think you'll be a really good banker, but something tells me you're going to be a phenomenal educator. And I cried, and then I interviewed at a high school, and the principal said that education is the civil rights movement of our time, and we educators are at the front line. And that kind of shifted my understanding of education. And I've been a teacher ever since. And I never went back to that bank.
That's awesome. I mean, what's interesting is that how sometimes the conversation changes the trajectory of kind of our life. It's
Yeah,
it's it's really, really it's pretty amazing how that happens. That's pretty cool.
yeah.
And I mean, obviously that was transformational for you because not only are you great at what you do, but then you're also taking it a next level. And we'll talk about NewComm in just a moment. But how has it been like, I'm curious about kind of being in education space, like what has been the biggest lessons for you as you've been in this space, whether it was like things that you found surprising as you were going, especially like, the education in America, we have it's pros and cons for sure. I also come from education background.
Yeah.
I've been there, I've seen it.
Hmm.
But what has been like the most surprising, maybe the most heartwarming pieces of your journey so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, The thing that surprised me very early on is, so I went to a high school that was pretty, some would say innovative. When you think of innovation, you think of, I don't know, really fancy science labs and entrepreneurship programs. But innovative in a sense that they were not only training us to be good students, they were training us to be strong and confident young men. Well, I went to an all boys high school. And so a lot of the things we were doing were unorthodox. Our first year at the high school, we slept on the gym floor to know the school. We learned the school songs. We were tested on our ability to know all of our classmates' names. For the first week of school, we had to sing the school songs in the hallway. I mean, we were doing
Wow,
all things like that. To graduate into your sophomore year, you had to hike with your friends, part of the Appalachian Trail. Like we were just doing, to
that's
me,
pretty cool.
I didn't know any other high school experience. So I'm thinking, I guess that's pretty normal. And so what was shocking to me is that not every high school is thinking about the development of our humanities in that way. I thought that was just normal, and now I'm
Yeah.
realizing it's innovative. And so, what was surprising to me when I became an educator of how traditional it is, like just how like it's just here is content. Can you regurgitate it back to me? And can you do that for the next, 4 years of your life? So I
Hmm.
was really struck by that. I was really, really struck by that. And that was the biggest surprise. And as I've moved through my education career, I've been struck by how, how what's the word, resistant innovation is in our space. So that's one that's been really surprising. But I do
Why do
think
you
that
think that is? Sorry to maybe
um,
dive a little bit
um,
deeper.
I think, and this is something that I also, as someone who is considers myself an innovator or trying to be an innovator in education, is that it's sometimes hard to quantify the outcomes in a less traditional space. So, for example,
Mm.
if you come to me and you don't know how to swim, and I teach you that you have to move your arms in this fashion, and you go home and you practice that fashion, and then by the end of 8 weeks you start doing that, and now you learn how to swim. Then me as an educator says, I did it. Like I taught you how to
Mm-hmm.
swim. If you don't know how to do math and I teach you the skill, the structure how to do math, and then you do it, and then you have mastered math, then you did it. But anything that strays away from that, it becomes a little bit harder to like
Mm-hmm.
see if they were able to get that skill. So if I say we're teaching critical reading and writing skills through doing a 7 week internship at the museum where they have to work with the museum employees around an exhibition, and they come back and say, "Oh, that was a great experience. I was a part of these meetings, and how cool that was." Yeah, there probably was critical reading and writing skills involved with that. In fact, I imagine there was a ton of that, but it's hard to assess what skills were learned. So
Yeah.
that's why it's harder. People find it harder to go walk down that path because you're not really sure if they ever learn something. So that's why you see all the flashy, innovative things happening in education. Teachers are a little bit resistant to that because they want to be able to know for certainty that we taught students something. So
Mm-hmm.
that's giving grace to our educators. Um, what's heartwarming, going back to the original question, what's heartwarming about this field is how hungry students are. I think there is a level of disengagement, and I think traditional forms of education. I think because there's so much information on the internet, so the idea of school being the only place I get information is no longer a thing. So you see this engagement there. But once you create a lesson or a program and an opportunity where kids can actually receive critical life skills, or they're able to see how that foreign thing relates to their story, and you see them light up, you get to see there is hunger in our young people to learn. We just got to figure out what is the structure to extract that at scale. So that to me is, I feel like I've dedicated my life to figuring out what is that unique learning structure that will continue to feed the hunger of our young people.
Mm. Yeah, and I very much relate to that. I was never, when I was growing up, I was like an average to below average, actually. I was like a C student on a good day. And I tend to be also a person who jump. I'm sure I have some level of AD or whatever it is. Like, I don't know if it's that or if it's just I just was bored doing certain things. Like,
Yeah.
my brain is more in a creative and more the doing. I want to be out there. I want to experiment with things. I want to do stuff. Like I can't just sit like and like study. Like my brain, like it gets scattered, like the information.
Hmm.
So that's what I felt like well, for me, what I was missing. And I remember the things that I really was really great at is that where I was able to have opportunities to learn, to do hands-on stuff, to do
Right.
different things
Right.
that I can see. Oh, and then
Right.
eventually I realized I was like, oh, it's not that I'm not smart, which is what I thought for majority of my younger years because I
Right.
just was not a
Right.
good student. It's like, oh,
Right.
I just wasn't doing things that are aligned with the way my brain operates, the way my mind works, and so on.
Right.
And
Right.
this is kind of what you're, from what I understand, this is what you're doing with NewComm is like you're
Yeah.
creating these opportunities, which I think is so needed. And and it's just I know it's like one of those things that's like it's just it is what it is. But I'm mind blown that we're not like and I think like we need to give with grace to teachers, but I think it's a larger
Absolutely.
problem. It's
Absolutely.
not on the teachers. It's like it's
Absolutely.
the overall structure of how we structure
Hmm.
our education system. I
Hmm.
think needs to be
Hmm.
rethought. But
Hmm.
anyway, before I go down that rabbit hole, talk to me about
Yeah.
NewComm because that's
Yeah.
what you're trying to do, trying to really
Yeah.
kind of just create this community transformation.
Absolutely. Newcom, to back up a little bit, Newcom is inspired by that comment that was made from that high school principal that education is the civil rights movement of our time, and we educators are at the front line. I have been that line has been like tattooed on the back of my eyelids since that time. That was almost 20 years ago this time. And so and I was just doing, my thing. I was teaching English. I was reading all the heavy hitters, the Morrisons, the Baldwins, the Butlers, Shakespeare,
Mm,
and I didn't feel like I was doing frontline work. I didn't feel like that we were having all these critical conversations about the impact of power or gender roles, political stuff that are happening in the literary world. And the relationship between the literary world and the real world was so on the table, but the assessment was an essay. The assessment was a group project, but we never really made that connection in a way that time allowed. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've always thought about like what could that look like? And Newcom came to be as, wait, what if we created a community of learners who are coming into a third space, um, and they're able to break bread with each other, which is what our young people want to do. They want to build relationships with each other. But what brings them to the table is how do we apply what we are learning in our schools to what's happening in the world? Like, and that's why we're at this table. And what if it was more than a thought experiment? What if we actually had real resources, financial resources? So putting $10,000 on the table, we had the resources of our mentors. So we have mentors coming from local professors or teachers from other schools coming together, and institutions, right? What if our local libraries and our local colleges and our school district came together and said, "You're learning this over there. Let's bring it together and figure out how we can use that as critical tools for investing back in our community
Mm-hmm.
through, different types of opportunities from addressing food insecurity or supporting small business or to you name it. And what if kids were the leading drivers of that? And so to me, that will is meant to re-engage students into the importance of the conversations happening in the classroom because they're able to use it in a really powerful way in their neighborhood. And so
Mm-hmm.
the big bet of Newcom is, could this idea of what we call a community design studio, where these spaces exist in your community, where you come with other students and you're building in community, would that usher in a new culture of learning that is more tied to social impact? Also, because it's a lot of our education reform is really tied to self, meaning like how can we get you out of your low income community and go upskill yourself so you can, live in your fancy house. There's nothing wrong with that. But what if we tie our success to the person next to you? That we're saying that by upskilling myself, I'm putting myself in a position where I get to succeed, but also the person next to me can succeed because we're trying to build environments where our friends can come into. And so
Mm-hmm.
to me, we believe this is where education needs to go, especially education reform is how do we make the table wide enough? And not just how do I escape the tables that I am currently in? And so Newcom is really based on community engaged success. It's
Mm-hmm.
about not forgetting individual success, right? We want to make sure our students are doing well in school individually, but they're also looking around and see who else can I bring to the table who is not being represented. And so to us, we believe that's how education can improve in this next season.
You know, what's interesting is that there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I want to kind of talk about. So
Yeah.
one part of it is like the third spaces have kind of gone away for a little while, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm really excited for it to
Yeah.
start to see a comeback because we see the impact of not having those spaces. So, well, I mean, even if we're specifically talking about youth, so loneliness is on the rise for a lot of youth. And
Mhm.
so not having that community, I mean, we see the impact of that so much right now with like suicide
Mhm.
rates for youth,
Mhm.
that disengagement, that
Mhm.
loneliness. I mean, it's skyrocketing, right? So I think
Mhm.
one, having these communities is so important for youth, but also for older adults, but also youth.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's important, you mentioned around having this opportunity to expand it to a wider community. I had a guest on my podcast maybe like a month ago, Jabari Young. So he is very successful in the media right now, etc. And he was telling me how he grew up in the not so great a part of Philadelphia, but then he would go to school at a nicer part of Philadelphia, and every time he would, or to work, I forget, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Jabari, if he listens to this, but so basically he had an opportunity where I think he was going to school or to work, and then I think it was work, to another part of Philadelphia. And when he would go on his way there, he would go from like, low socioeconomic background neighborhoods
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
like nicer spaces. And he was like, well, wait a minute, it's just, like there's other things that I can do and can be.
Hmm.
And it's almost like when we don't see something that we can reach, like, right, like
Absolutely.
if we're just only stuck in this community, we don't know what we
Absolutely.
don't know. And I
Absolutely.
think creating these spaces again, it works both ways. I think one,
Absolutely. Uh-huh.
for the youth coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds, it
Mm.
offers an opportunity to say, wait a minute, there are people that look just like me, that have very similar backgrounds in some capacity, and they're doing these things, so that's possible for me. And also on the flip side, I think for the more privileged, upbringings, it also gives you an opportunity to reflect and to say, wait a minute, like there's like it creates empathy in a way, because I think we're just so stuck in what we know that we forget that there's a larger world out there, and it's all part of our community.
Absolutely. 1000%. One of the, what I truly believe is an innovative um, part of NewComm is when you think about New York City, it is home to some of the worst under-resourced schools in the nation, right? There's some really, really challenging spots in New York City. It's also home to some of the most expensive schools in the city. Um, um, and to me, feel that there's an opportunity to leverage these spaces that are right now private infrastructure, gated, right? That you need some resources to be able to enter those spaces. But what if on weekends or after hours those doors are opened and they're now critical public infrastructure, right? Where now students are able to access those spaces, walk those halls, have access to the teachers that are in those spaces, right? And figuring out new pathways to strengthen their own academic skills, but also point those academic skills back to their community, learn and bring it back, right? And so what we're trying to say is, how can we leverage spaces that already exist and turn them into community design studios? And so at NewComm, we've partnered with Horace Mann School in the Bronx because what an incredible location, what incredible facilities right in the Bronx. And to be able to partner with schools that are just 1, 2, 3 miles radius from that institution and bring them together to be in those spaces and to be able to see what's possible, and to be in a space where they can imagine is a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for folks that are teaching there, giving them an opportunity to take that knowledge that they are sharing from Monday through Friday in a certain environment and be able to share that with community. I mean, be able to see, going back to that, educators at the front lines of social impact, that they're able to directly see that impact by seeing how local youth are able to use that education to further their lives and the lives of their community. And so we see that as a clear way to make real change in our communities by leveraging the spaces, the really powerful and beautiful, well-resourced spaces that already exist in our communities.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just so needed, and it seems like the divide is becoming bigger and bigger between like the different classes, right? And it's like you would think that it should be getting better,
Yeah,
right? Like it's wild, like it should be getting better in terms
yeah,
of like and I just feel like at least in America, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, I'm from Russia, and in Russia, it's pretty much like you just have two classes. You either just completely at the bottom and you're just stuck, or you're super corrupt and you're doing some bad things and you're up there.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
wild. And it's just like you want to see this. You want to see this community. It's like it's all one community at the end of the day.
yeah.
And I think it's yeah, New York is a good example of that. You're so spot on. Like there's just
Mhm,
such discrepancies between
mhm,
educational
mhm.
level, like education quality, if you want to call, I guess,
Quality. Yeah. Yeah.
experience and
Yeah. Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
And it seems backwards. I never got that. But no, so I think it's amazing what you're doing. So what are some areas, I guess, like that you're most excited for this year? Like what are some cool initiatives that you guys are doing within that? What are you really
Mhm.
excited about for this program or these
Yeah.
communities?
Yeah, I have there's a development that we haven't signed the contract yet. So I'm gonna try to say a development without saying a development. Um, okay. What's exciting about NewComm is to creating a true learners ecosystem that is not just thought experiments, that it's the place where we can start figuring out challenges that 15, 16, 17-year-olds can tackle. And being able to partner with established organizations and companies that are also trying to solve those challenges. So a lot of things happen when that happens, right? So I mean, so many things, but I'll try to name a few of what's powerful about young people working with established industry leaders on the things that they both, right? First of all, you're creating true partnership, right? A lot of times, when young people are interfacing with industry leaders, it's a mentorship thing, right? It's the power dynamic is clear.
Hmm.
Especially those who are coming from low income backgrounds. It's like they're coming there to be inspired by the folks that have made it. In the NewComm framework, we're saying that these students are the most proximate people, the people who are most knowledgeable about what's happening in their communities. And now the power dynamic's a little bit different because when they come partner with industry leaders who are also trying to impact those spaces, now that's an interesting conversation that's happening between youth and industry leaders. And now the youth are able to see that they have an asset that is something that is valued, and that they feel confident about talking about. And now with the industry leaders' expertise, they're now giving a tool set that they can start impacting now, right?
Hmm.
So that to me is such a powerful ecosystem where you're not really sure who's a teacher and who's a student, right?
Hmm.
That's really cool. What's also cool is that how that sets up a pipeline for youth to be able to be exposed to industries at 15, that to be able to say, all right, I have an amorphous understanding of my life, but because I had this experience with this professional in this very niche way, that you know what, I'm now interested in X, Y, and Z. And so maybe that's what I'll do. I'll go to college and I'll study more about that, and then that can flip that experience as that's now my mentor, and now they could be
Yeah.
mentored throughout college, and perhaps there could be a job on the other end. And so those are I'll name those two.
Hmm.
And so what's exciting about where we're going is we want to build these think tanks around, but essentially, where youth are in true partnership with adults.
Hmm.
Um, and everyone's learning, and we're able to build these serious hubs of engagement, but also community innovation, that are led by young people. So what's exciting about where we're going is I am not seeking to start another, you know, another youth program. What we're trying to build is something more urgent. This is the civic square, right? This is the
Hmm.
town hall. This is the agora. Like this is the moment. This is the space where students are come to the table with their diverse assets, and they're in real conversation with those who are pulling the levers. And the hope is that now we build the kind of spaces that are truly equitable, because the people who are experiencing the challenges have a seat at the table for real. And the
Hmm.
hope is that they're able to go back to their school communities armed with an understanding of why all this stuff matters. And hopefully, and this could be, a naive bet, but the hope is that that builds culture around learning that's just radically different than what we're currently seeing, especially in a post-COVID environment.
Hmm. And so I spent a lot of time in talent development and talent recruitment, and what I see also as a benefit is having industry leaders speak with the youth, like to your point, like it's like both sides of the students. And I think one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is educating hiring managers or industry leaders about what the new generation wants.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is interesting to them, what is exciting to them,
Mhm.
how to manage them, how to help them grow, how to mentor them. And I
Mhm.
think the more we can engage, and granted,
Sure.
sure, there's time constraints, but I think the more it can become a learning community, the more it can be like a culture of learning and a culture of like, hey, this benefits everybody, in fact.
Mhm.
This is not you giving this mentorship or you giving your time to, no, no, no. You benefit just as much on the
Yeah.
industry side. Like if we're just talking straight business, right? Because some
Yeah.
people are like, well, business is business. Like if
Yeah.
we're talking straight business, this benefits your business because it creates more education for you as a business industry leader to
1000%.
understand what does your potential young talent pipeline look like and how can you adjust the way that you work, the way you run business to make sure you have the top talent coming in and people want to come work with you.
1000%. 1000%. We had our very first project. So this is our second year in existence. And NewComm's always been a class I taught. I'm teaching it for the past 10 years, but now we're like in communities. Our very first project was a play on the Met Gala. It was called the Net Gala. And the students wanted to build more robust social capital networks. They felt that they all had big dreams for their professions, but they didn't know a doctor, they didn't know a lawyer, they didn't know an artist, right? They didn't know these people. And so they wanted to create opportunities where they can rub shoulders in a more casual party vibe than just that they come to our classroom. And so the Net Gala was born. We had it last year. It was so good that we're doing it again. But we had 100 teenagers at the Net Gala. We had about 80 professionals at the Net
Wow.
Gala. And it's a true story. As the Net Gala was winding down, there was a young, not young, he's an older gentleman, and he was crying in the corner, like tearing up in the corner. And I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on there? Oh boy. And so I walk up to him and I'm like, is everything okay? And he's like, this is so beautiful. Uh,
Mm,
and he said, I have been asked to come to a lot of like mentorship things coming into the classroom. I give my spiel. He's a nurse, and just telling them all about what it means to be a nurse and all of that. I give my whole spiel. They're looking at me, but it's like whatever. I leave. He's like, this is the first time I went to a space and it felt like I feel welcomed. I feel like we're all like hanging out together. He said, I'm clearly in their space. I'm in their home with them and they invited me
mm,
into their home. And that's that's what we're trying to create.
mhm,
Is let the youth create the perfect environment. And again, this idea of the civic square, the youth are the ones building it, and then adults are invited in. I think we can really create some really powerful cross-learning experiences because everyone's being authentic. Everyone gets an opportunity to be themselves, and I think that's where real learning happens.
mm. That's beautiful. Chidi, you are very busy as an individual. So how do you maintain, the drive and the motivation? And it's not easy work that you're doing. It's
No.
it's I'm sure it's has its part,
Mm.
like it's emotional. It's draining in
Training.
good in good and in bad ways, I would imagine. But like, how do you manage to keep this going with such passion?
Um, a couple things. So I have a kind of a business answer and I have a heart answer.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the business answer. This is a new thing. I haven't actually said it out loud. So this is the first time I'm sharing this out loud. It's a new thought. I think when I started this thing, it was clearly my vision. It's like my thing. And so when I invited, people to work with me, the my posture was I'm inviting people to help me with my vision, which makes sense, right? Um, However, what that forces is you are the nucleus and you only come down when you need help with like, can you sign that thing? It creates this really interesting, weird dynamic where you're this bright sun that people are scared to like touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm realizing that what the real posture is that you're inviting people to come partner with you to grow this vision. It's a different posture. It means that you empower folks first of all, you educate people on what the vision meant to you, and then invite them into the vision. There's a scene in If Beale Street Can Talk by James Baldwin. I'm an English teacher, so I have to bring in novels. But there's a scene where the main characters are looking for an apartment. They couldn't find an apartment, couldn't find an apartment, couldn't find an apartment. And finally, they find a landlord who's super nice to them. And one of the characters says, I can't see myself living here, though. It's nice, but I can't see myself living here. And they pretend to place a couch in the corner. They pretend to put in a stove in this place, right? And so they were actively dreaming up the apartment together, the landlord and the person, the rentee. And that's kind of what I've been doing, is like inviting others to help me dream, build their dream based on their own dreams and all what they think about education and bringing their experiences. So what that has done is allowed me to relinquish this need to be in control of every single T and I of this organization, and being in meetings where I just listen to how someone else is building upon my vision with their vision and how they come together, right?
Hmm.
And my job is to more say, all right, that makes sense. That's good. That makes sense. Or to be able to say, that's good, but it may not fit what we're trying to do at NewComm. And so
Yeah.
that has released a lot of pressure for me, is to empower really smart people to share their thoughts and share the load and help facilitate the dream making. And then on the heart side is there are these moments that I keep in my heart, and when times are hard, that I just kind of summon. There's these like moments that happen in our program where I'm like, yep, we're going in the right direction. Like, I think about one of our students who was incredibly shy, incredibly, I would say, really going through a hard time in the beginning of our program. And then seeing how she now wants the microphone. She now
Hmm.
speaks with confidence. She stands up more straight. Um, and I think of her a lot when I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I so focused on this thing? I think about that student. I think about other students who came into our program one way is now leaving another, or kids who are now going to college and getting scholarships. All these things are happening in such a short period of time. Is just reminders that we're going in the right direction. And while
Hmm.
it may be hard, it's on us to remain brave and remain strong, because there are students that are coming behind them that will also get those success too. And so we have to do it for them. And so, yeah, it's just reminding myself of those success stories kind of keeps me going.
Yeah, I got goosebumps when you were talking about that student. I can like see that because I
Yeah.
work with a lot of youth, and and they can benefit so much from these kind of things. So it's
Sure.
really thank you for doing the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing. I hope people listening to this will reach out and kind of see
Oh,
what they
yeah.
can contribute. Before I ask you my last question, where can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more about NewCom?
Yeah, very simple. Our website is newcomproject.org. That's NEWCOM as in Mary, M as in Mary, project.org. It gives you an insight of our ecosystem. We have our two layers of, not layers, two tiers of students, our members and our fellows. You get an opportunity to see the contributions that they have, but also opportunities for folks to join in. Again, we are trying to build the civic square, right? Build that back in our communities, led by our young people. So we're always looking for adults, industry leaders, professionals, parents, grandmothers, grandfathers to join in the learning that's happening there. So the website gives you an opportunity to see how you can tap in there. And on LinkedIn, I'm pretty accessible on LinkedIn using my name.
Perfect. I'll make sure all that in the show notes for people who are listening. Last question I ask all of my guests. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Um, oh, this is This is a question someone asked me that has made me go, oh, it's interesting. I want to know more about, like, what are your core values? Like, life is life, but what do you hold on to? Um, because establishing your core values means that, and that, like, for example, one of my core values is based on the book Unreasonable Hospitality. Like,
Mhm.
I try my hardest to go one step above when I'm interacting with someone. That's like a thing. I believe in that, and I believe that spreads kindness and helps is my contribution to help change the world. Right? Is something. So anything that operates against that, because it's my core value, I'm very confident being like, I'm not for that. And then we have to. I think the world we're bombarded with attempts to influence us. I mean, we are living in the biggest moment of influence. And so I think we're in a moment now that is calling us to what are those pillars that it's who we are as people, and who what are those core values for ourselves? Because we got to be brave enough to say no to things, like and brave, and also be brave enough saying that I cannot stand up, but I have to stand up for those things. We're in those moments now, and so yeah, that's my big question: is have you taken the time to establish your core values?
Beautiful. Chidi, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.